All the major media attention to Russia's meddling in our election largely misses the real story of the corruption in the 2016 election. The news bomb that Assange and WikiLeaks gave the world starting on October 7, 2016, while the general election campaign was still in process, and which also showed my campaigns and the DNC's dirty tricks played on Bernie Sanders during the primary, had little to no effect on shifting the polling that was constantly being done at the time. I belatedly must admit I won the election against Trump. The real story and the supreme irony of the 2016 election is that besides the popular vote, I likely won the electoral vote. Only a small amount of the American public knows this because I did not speak up about the unambiguous election fraud in 3 swing states. During the debates, I walked right into Trump's smokescreen of claiming his campaign might suffer election vote manipulation. I responded by claiming America's elections have high integrity. Unfortunately, history is repeating itself in 2020. Trump is repeating the same smokescreen about voter fraud against him, and the Democrats and the major media are answering in the same way, that Trump claims of fraud are baseless. This sets the Democrats up for the Republican election fraud that is being actively committed in favor of Trump. The more accurate and informative way to answer Trump's deception is to say, yes, there is widespread election fraud, and it is being committed by Republican officials in the following states, and name the states. In 2016, Trump advisors knew the voting process and vote counting process were both subject to manipulation, and probably told him to raise the issue in order to cover for what they were doing to falsely give him a win in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. After election night, I learned that in North Carolina, the chance of the counting results deviating in Trump's favor from the exit polls by the amount that they did are approximately 18,000 to 1. There are several websites detailing the fraud in the 2016 election. One easy one to remember is saveyourfreedoms.us. We cannot upset the markets in the interest of democracy. Numerous reasons stop me from speaking up after the elections, but the biggest reason is that it would strongly upset the financial markets of the world to know that there was likely major election fraud in the US. The financing of the large American debt through the sale of treasury bonds to the world and the strength of the dollar relies on the illusion that we have checks and balances and rule of law, which is predicated on fair elections and a democratic process existing in America. It is considered very bad form for major presidential contenders in the American political system to cause economic instability. It is typical of the major media and politicians like myself to not delve into the complex problems of our election systems, which is increasingly fraught with voter roll purging of likely Democratic voters, and the closing of polling places in high Latinx, Afro-American, and Asian voting areas. These groups are often Democratic voters. Some attention has been given to the problem of gerrymandering, but almost none to vote flipping in electronic voting systems with no paper ballot audit procedure in place. About a quarter of our voting machines in the United States, very stupidly, don't have paper trails, said former CIA Director Woolsey in December 2016. Who committed the likely electronic vote count fraud in the 3 swing states that cost me the election? It is unlikely that Trump directly knew about it. Those of us at the top of the ticket are always given plausible deniability by our loyal upper echelon. Pence's fundamentalist supporters who knew Trump was not one of their own were convinced by Pence that Trump would stuff the courts with their ilk. Pence is well connected to the small group of Republican-dominated electronic voting machine manufacturers who can rig the count through software updates, etc. Three companies control the U.S. market for voting machines. ES&S, formerly Diebold, 55%, Dominion, 30%, and Hart, 15%. If you want to see a detailed examination of ES&S and its potential role in helping Trump in 2020, check the following websites. Now we are heading for another coup, with Trump stealing the election in these toss-up states where the elections apparatus is controlled by Republicans in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, and Arizona, plus lean Democratic states, Wisconsin and Michigan, which have Republicans in control of the vote count. Trump keeps speaking against mail-in ballots, filing lawsuits in an attempt to limit voting by mail, and is in the process of destroying the postal system because he knows mail-in ballots increase voter turnout. Any increase in voter turnout tends to favor Democrats. Trump recently appointed a new Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, who is a high donor to the Republican Party and now in the process of completing a major destruction of the U.S. mail service. The plan is to completely control and slow it down so that vote by mail will not work. Below are two websites that look at polling from an electoral college perspective. Remember, it is not the popular vote that counts, which Biden, like I did, will win by a wide margin. It is electoral votes that count. If Trump's campaign cheats in a big way, enough to win, then the major media will roll over in the interest of market stability and never question the corruption of the election systems. We will thus have another soft coup as we did in 2016. Even with the Republican control of vote counting, polling places, and voter purges in critical swing states, given that Biden is currently so far ahead, it may not give Trump the electoral vote, or it may result in 268 to 268 electoral vote count, or Biden could get over the 270 required electoral votes. In any of these scenarios, the violence could start. Trump will never concede the election if the electoral vote goes against him, and his supporters are armed and dangerous. Everything indicates November 2020 will likely be a dangerous time in America. Trump is already preparing to litigate the results. Two good current films on the problems and solutions for the American election systems. Kill Chain, The Cyber War on America's Elections, very current HBO film. The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, The Case of the Stolen Election.